So I did a bit of research on your presentation to see how the event or how the actual event actually goes. And I've seen some which are, what I call it, the non-financial one. Azra did a talk with you guys on Asia, Jason Lowe did a talk, I think Twin Talk, and one of my ex-colleagues, Izam Omar, gave a talk when he was the CEO of Ekuiti. And then I compared to the financial ones, and the financial one was a bit boring, I thought, compared to the so-called media or the non-financial one. So I really hope today that I can do better and can interest you in terms of what private equity is all about. So we asked to talk about three things. The first thing is about private equity, what it's all about. I'm not quite sure how much you guys actually know about private equity. So I'll try to tell you a bit about the investment class and what it's all about. And secondly, I'm here to actually talk about EKUINAS, which is where I currently lead and work. And then thirdly, I've been asked to share a bit about my journey to where I am now, and hopefully share with you the experiences and the journey I had. I'd like to keep the presentation relatively short because I prefer to have a more interactive session, a more informal session. So I hope to be able to do that part of it within say 25 half an hour, and then I'll be able to answer questions and on your different views. I'm more happy to actually to hear it. Anyway, let's start on private equity. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with private equity. Private equity is a big, what we call alternative asset investment class. There are words that like growth capital, buyouts, management buyouts, leverage buyout, buying buyouts. And these are words commonly known about on private equity. But generally, private equity is relatively simple. What it really involves is a firm would pool capital, and this capital can be raised from high net worth individuals or corporations or institutional funds. And what they actually do with that particular fund is then to actually invest in companies. Whether the company is high growth or the company is distressed, that doesn't quite matter. So the whole principle is that they will actually try to invest in this company, and then they try to create value. Now again, the value can be very, very different, whether it's actually growth, whether it's actually leveraging basically the company up, or actually turning it around. But the whole idea is to actually to create value for the company, because the next thing what they actually do is to exit. So unlike what we call strategic or corporate or institution, private equity actually have what we call a fixed period of investment. So they don't actually hold it forever. They always basically, when they invest with a view to actually to exit. And there are some really notable PE firms. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with some of them. Firms like KKR, CVC, Blackstone, Carlyle. Locally or regionally, there are firms like Mavis, which have really established themselves within the so-called private equity world. So, in terms of the actual words that we mentioned just now, growth capital is where they actually make investment, minority investment. Buyout is when they actually do what we call majority acquisition. Leverage buyouts is when they actually borrow or utilize a lot of gearing or debt to make the acquisition. And management buyouts where they actually back managers to acquire companies. So generally, these are the terms which are commonly known within the so-called private equity world. So in terms of as an investment asset class, private equity has been growing. Even though if you can look at the data, it's actually declining in terms of private equity deal values. That's because in 2007, 2008, effectively private equity were really, really aggressive. This is where money is free flowing. You can actually raise money to do deals. But generally, even now, in 2011, about 184 billion of investment were done in the private equity world. Of course, in the Southeast Asia, it is growing. Now, we haven't taken into account China and India, which is a very big private equity market. But generally, in terms of growth of private equity, in last year, private equity deals in Southeast Asia is roughly about 6.5 billion ringgit. So much so, I'm not sure whether you actually know this, but private equity influence is so prevalent that some of the personalities in private equity world have now really transcended private equity. I'm not sure you know Mitt Romney, which is currently the presidential candidate for the Republican who's going to fight Barack Obama, is actually from private equity. He used to actually lead a firm called Bain Capital, which is one of the largest private equity company in the world. Stephen Schwarzman, I'm not sure you're also familiar with the name. He actually co-founded Blackstone, which is now the largest private equity company in the world. Reputedly, he has a net worth of about 10 billion US. And actually, he's one of the richest men in the US. And Henry Kravis, which is the founding partner of KKR. Now, I'm not sure you actually watch a movie called Barbarians at the Gate. So this is where the famous takeover of RJR Nabisco back in the 1980s, whereby they did a lot of leverage. Was the biggest deal. It was about 30 billion US deal at that particular point of time, and became really, really famous. So these are the personalities, I guess, involved in private equity world. And the reason why they make so much money, and making it very, very simple, is that when private equity firms, they actually set up or pool the capital, their arrangement with the investors of the capital, or provider of the capital, is that they actually will earn fees of 2% as well as 20% of every profit generated. So as you know, I'm not sure whether some of you actually work in public equity where you manage people's money. Generally, public equity fund management only get 50 basis points, or 0.5% or 1% of the asset value. But the guys actually managing private equity, they actually get 2% per year, as well as 20% of profit generated. Meaning that the amount of money they can actually make, if their private equity investment is successful, is very, very high. So that is why I think Blackstone now, I think it's a listed company in the US, I think market cap is very huge. Kuala, I think it's about to go listing. KKR obviously is one of the largest private equity company in the world. I need to have a drink. Yeah. Sorry, okay. So that's private equity. Now talking about EKUINAS. Now EKUINAS is set up effectively as a private equity firm. It's a bit of misnomer because our funding comes from government. So generally private equity, the bulk of the money comes from the private sector. So we were set up in 2009 by the government of Malaysia, which is to be a government-linked private equity firm, and our role is to promote equitable and sustainable Bumi Putra economic participation via the creation of Malaysia's next generation of leading companies. That's a bit of a mouthful there. I'll try to explain what exactly we do. Obviously, during the announcement by the government, they said they're going to allocate 10 billion ringgit. I think the announcement said it was 10 billion ringgit, but typically Malaysia started off 10 billion ringgit when it's actually about to be implemented. The actual allocation for the 5 years is about 5 billion ringgit. Of course, we're all very serious to this. Trying to check some humor. Anyway, we allocated 5 billion ringgit under the 9 and 10 Malaysian plan, and currently we are managing about 1.8 billion ringgit. But because again, particularly in Malaysia, they don't give you all the money up front, they give you over a period of time, and generally our allocation is roughly about 1 billion ringgit a year. So at the moment we manage roughly about 1.8 billion ringgit today. Next slide. So what do we do? We are government-sponsored PE firm, so it's slightly, we are quite unique, and we're supposed to be what we call the new style, innovative instrument under the new economic model. So we are PE firm. We do two things. We invest the money directly ourselves, so we make that what we call direct investment. We also outsource some of our money to third-party private equity firm. This is to encourage Malaysian domestic private equity industry, which is still very, very nascent at the moment. We do what we call, we also do what we call co-investment deals with private sector. This is to ensure the money being utilized is larger than what's allocated by the government. And we try to benchmark ourselves against the best of private equity firms in the world, the best practices of the global private equity firms. Now, obviously, as part of the so-called new economic model, we are supposed to follow, very importantly, 4 key principles. Anything that we do has to be market friendly, meaning that there is no forced deal. 2, Two, must be merit-based, so we select companies that we feel that fulfill our criteria. Third, we are very transparent. If you are interested, you can go to our website, we can give you our annual report. We actually show you how we are performing year on year, which is not so easy in private equity because most private equity firms are very, very private. And lastly, as mentioned, we try to actually benchmark ourselves against the best practices of global private equity firms. So what we do roughly what I said all private equity firms actually do, which is invest in high potential companies. We try to help them to actually grow and then create value. And most importantly, we try to actually do what we call transformative deals, which is to try to turn a lot of companies into future market leaders. And hopefully, if we can do that, we can exit profitably. So this is what we call an innovative instrument, but it's not the first time any government in the world actually tried to do. Now again, I'm not sure whether you're familiar, one of the earliest private equity firms is a firm called 3i, which is now one of the largest, also one of the largest European private equity firms. So 3i was started back in 1948 by the British government. Now at that point of time, post-war, UK government was worried there's not enough capital being pumping to back companies or medium-sized company in UK. So they actually set up 3i using the bank's money. And I think 3i was started with only like £50 million. And then generally from that, it actually grew, and obviously after some 20-30 years, they were then effectively were privatized. So 3i now is actually owned privately by the partners that is listed in the UK Stock Exchange. So in terms of how we are structured, the money which is given by the government is given to a yayasan. Now this structure is exactly how PNB started. Again, I'm not quite sure whether you guys are familiar with PNB. PNB is owned by a foundation or a yayasan called Yayasan Pelaburan Putra. So EKUINAS is similar setup. We are owned by a yayasan called Yayasan Ekuiti Nasional. The government allocate the fund to be held in trust, and then we actually then manage the money. Now, in all private equity, there are two main important structure that they actually do. One is the fund management company. In private equity term, they are called general partners. So EKUINAS is that. So we are a fund management company. We actually act as the fund manager, and this is where all the management team actually reside. The actual fund itself is given by Yayasan to a fund capital company called EKUINAS Capital, which in private equity jargon is called limited partner, and that's the entity that actually makes the investment. So as I mentioned just now, we have that so-called two types. One, we do the investment directly, called direct investment, and secondly, where we outsource the money to third-party private equity managers, and they make the investment. So these are all the structure, how we actually set it up. Next. In terms of trustee, I'm sure you're interested. Again, in Malaysia, it's all the ministers and the board members. We were very, very careful to make sure that it is independent. Most of them are independent. They do not come from government. And generally, we have a very good and very strong board that oversees and approves every single investment that we actually do. Next slide. Okay, so what are we supposed to actually do? Just like any private equity, we have what we call our financial objectives. But slightly different for what we call a lot of the so-called developmental organizations. We also have a social objective. So the financial objective is simple. We have a 12% IRR target as a minimum and 20% IRR target as an aspirational target. Now, we chose this figure not out of the blue. Before we actually set up EKUINAS, we actually studied what is the average return of private equity in emerging markets. And generally, the average return is roughly about 12%. And the best performing fund is roughly delivers about 20%. So we thought that this was a good target for us to actually to set. Because the one thing that we received advice, or of course I think when we set up EKUINAS, we went to see some of the so-called organizations like 3i, as well as CDC, that actually also does private equity investment for the UK government in developing world. The biggest advice is that in order to actually to achieve any social objective that you desire, you actually must be commercially disciplined. So that is why creating commercial return, it is our main focus for EKUINAS. For the social objective, of course, I think we are here to actually as an innovative MEP instrument. So we are supposed to actually to increase Bumi Putra economic participation appreciate equitably, and we try to measure it across 4 dimensions. 1, through equity, so the Bumi equity. 2 is management, and then 3rd is employment, and 4 is value chain. But at the end of the day, we at EKUINAS try to see it very, very differently. I think our job mainly is actually to try to turn or transform a lot of middle-sized companies into what we call the future market leaders. Because our thesis is simple. In Malaysia, a lot of companies are stuck in what we call the middle-sized trap, whereby they are really not small, and yet basically they are not able to actually to grow and become really leaders in their industry. And that's what we believe is our job. So if you look at the so-called business life cycle, and there's a lot of government institutions. So that's just one thing I learned when I was asked to set up EKUINAS, is that government has a lot of institutions. And what we didn't want to do was to overlap with a lot of them, because I'm a great believer of focus. And focus is really important in making sure that you are able to actually to achieve meaningful impact. Otherwise, if you try to do everything, invariably you will fail. So just if you look at the business life cycle, there's a lot of institutions already involved in what I call the startup or the micro enterprises, as well as the mature companies. So for the startup, micro and development stage, there are companies like Cradle, PUNB, PNS, SME Corp, and SME Bank, which actually focus for these guys. And as well as the mature side, I'm sure you guys know about agencies like Khazanah, PNB, LTAT, PF. Now they invest in larger companies, more mature companies, listed companies. So what we found was that there is a gap in the market. It's a gap to this what we call mid-sized businesses that have been in operation for quite some time. Yet they are sort of like, they have high potential, but they are not yet what we call the leaders of their industry. So generally, we are quite focused and actually focus on this segment of the market, and then really try to actually to back these companies. And leading to that, effectively we do what we call 3 types of investment. One, we call it growth capital. If you remember, growth capital, I defined it just now, is where we do minority investment stake. So we back companies, Malaysian companies, to help them to accelerate growth. We've done deals like offshore, which actually tries to do that. Secondly, we do what we call buyouts. This is where we take majority control of Malaysian companies. Now, a lot of Malaysian companies, as I mentioned, sort of like family-based. They build up their business, but in reality, they're actually looking for an exit or institutionalizing their company before it actually goes to the next phase of growth. So that's what we actually do. We actually undertake majority investment. So we call it buyouts of Malaysian company. Now we back either capable, targeted professional, meaning professional managers, or entrepreneurs to actually to manage. If they don't have that, then our onus is actually to identify them and try to actually to put in some of these professional managers or entrepreneurs into this company. Now the third type is what we call buyouts of what we call non-core companies, or GLC, PLC, and MNCs. Now this is where in Malaysia, I think there's a lot of companies, in general within the government named investment corporation, PLC, which really are not really core to the main vehicle. So what we try to actually do, we actually try to do either management buyout or buyout this company and actually install professional management. And this is where we actually give equity to these managers. And in private equity or alignment of interest is really important. So what we actually do is that we do not ask our managers to actually to come up with the capital, because most of them don't have capital. But what we actually do is that we incentivize them by saying that if you can deliver this number of performance over the next 5 years, you'll be given free shares. It's what we call sweat equity. So you actually work for your equity, and this gives you the opportunity to actually to earn equity without actually having to borrow money. Because if you remember, one of the problems during the 1990s, late 1990s, before the recession, a lot of government gave opportunities to a lot of entrepreneurs to buy into companies. Most of them, because they do not have capital, actually have to borrow money. And when the economy turns back, and all of these entrepreneurs really, were in trouble because they had too much debt. And when they have too much debt, the so-called, what we call a moral hazard, whereby why they tend to actually to do things that may not necessarily be good for the company, but just to ensure they got enough cash to actually service their debt. So that's why I think in terms of the model that we actually try to do, we actually try to change it by now effectively backing professional managers and say that, look, you do not need to come up with the capital, we'll come up with the capital, but you can earn equity through your performance. So roughly these are the three types of investment that we actually do. And in reality, we are allowed to actually invest in any sectors. But we chose roughly 6 sectors that we wanted to focus on. Education, I think we've been big on, oil and gas, fast-moving consumer goods, services, healthcare, retail and leisure. So these are the 6 areas, and we've done 5 investment in 5 of the 6 category. The one investment that we haven't done is in healthcare, and that's been quite challenging because in healthcare, that's the valuation. I'm sure if you read the investment, the valuation is very, very high in this particular industry. But the 2 things or the 3 things that we are not allowed to do is construction, property, and any gaming or liquor business. So generally, EKUINAS can virtually invest in any sector apart from the so-called prohibited sectors, but we tend to focus on these 6 core areas. Because we really believe that in order for you to add value, you need to have some quite detailed industry understanding of what drives the industry. And that is why I think we try to limit ourselves within the sectors that I mentioned. Now, if you're interested further in private equity, the way that we actually operate is pretty simple, but effectively I can categorize it into 3 buckets. In terms of the direct investment, we generally we do 3 things. One, we deal source, meaning we actually have to find the deals. And this is where we go out and actually talk to a lot of the entrepreneurs or the professional managers, asking them whether they are interested to have us as an investor, and what's their ambition in terms of bringing the company. So a lot of the work that we do is all about what we call deal sourcing. Secondly, we do what we call investment evaluation. If we find the deal, and of course we actually have to do the investment evaluation side, assessing if the valuation makes sense, what's the projection, and more importantly, develop what we think is the value creation plan for this company. Because as I mentioned, the critical thing about private equity investment is how do you create value for each of the investment. Thirdly, and I think that's probably to us is the most important thing, is what we call post-acquisition investment management. Now this is where is the actual hard work, heavy lifting happens. Meaning that you actually have to execute your value creation plan and make sure that you can deliver the value that you actually promise. We are seeing in EKUINAS, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can actually do deals. But the difficulty is, whether we can actually create value. And that's not so easy. Because one of the key things about private equity is not as bad as venture capital, whereby out of 10 investment in the VC world, probably 2 investment will be successful, 3 investment will be okay, and probably 5 investment will be loss-making, but the good ones will cover the losses. But generally in VC, the payback or the investment is small, and the payback is huge. In private equity, generally the best of the private equity guys make 60% of their investment right. Meaning that 40% of their investment decisions are generally wrong. And the poorly performing private equity firm is the other way around. They actually make only 40% of their investment right and 60% of their investments wrong. So in general, that's where it's a very thin line of success. And that's why in private equity, it generally is really, really important for you to select the companies right. Because if you don't, then very quickly it will turn bad. So that is what we do in direct investment. On the outsource fund, it's different matter. Our job is to select the best private equity guys in Malaysia to manage our money, to make the investment. And then that's where what we do is that we actually do the fund manager selection. Then we structure the fund to make sure the alignment of interest. And then the third part is what we call OFM management. Which is to manage them, to make sure they make the right investment decision, make the right choice, and then at the end of the day, both direct investment and outsource actually have to exit. So generally, if you guys are interested to be in the private equity world, coming directly to the direct investment, it's roughly 3 skill sets that you require. One, you got to be a good deal sourcer. In that sense, a lot of investment bankers are a bit like that. They're very good at sourcing deals and marketing. 2, you need to do very good at investment evaluation. So this is where a lot of analysis and investment evaluation you actually need to do. And thirdly, we really value guys who know how to create value in the investing company. And that's not so easy because you can't actually manage the company themselves, because you actually have managers or CEOs that actually manage the company. So you need to be able to push them to drive value and execute the plan, while at the same time pull back, because obviously no managers or no CEO likes another person to actually to be behind their back and actually second guessing their decision. So generally, private equity world, you really got to have that 3 skill sets, and if you have that, then invariably you tend to be very good private equity person. The problem is, not many of us, and including me, really are good at all 3 skill sets, but require different aspects of personal skills, right? If you're a good deal sourcer, you're good at marketing, invariably sometimes you're not so good in terms of investment evaluation. Sometimes you're good at investment evaluation, you tend not to be so good at the marketing side. So that is so why it's difficult to get a full all-rounder private equity specialist in not only Malaysia but globally. Anyway, so in terms of investment today, about the end of my presentation, we have been set up over the last 2.5 years. We have fully invested our first fund, which is a $1 billion fund. For our direct side, we've done 10 deals today. And that's probably at the rate of about 4 deals a year. We started our first investment in a company called Alliance Cosmetic. It's the Simply Girl. I'm sure that you watch all the advertisement in Simply Girl. We actually have like Maui, Chef Ahmani, and Faisal Tade, and so these are our brand ambassador. So it's the second leading brand after L'Oreal in Malaysia, second largest cosmetic company domestically in Malaysia. Second investment was in Tanjung as an oil and gas company. So that's listed as a minority deal. We also did the management buyout of Consortium Logistics. This is a logistic company whereby 2 of the senior management wanted to buy out the company from the founder or entrepreneur. So we financed that. We have done big on education. So we've invested 3 investments in education. Apik CPI used to be a 100% subsidiary of Sapura Resources Berhad. So we have undertaken a 51% purchase of that. We acquired Cosmopolitan of KLMU, one of the largest Bumiputra education group. So we acquired 90% of the company. And most recent is UMTech or UNITA, which is another education group that we also acquired 90% on. So education has been big for our portfolio. We also have invested significantly in F&B. So we invested in Burger King, which used to be owned by CIMB in this Burger King Malaysia. We also have invested in San Francisco Coffee, as well as Revenue Valley, which owns Tony Roma's, Manhattan Fish, as well as Popeye. So generally, we are big on education. We also are investing quite significantly in F&B. And recently, we facilitated the demerger of Tanjung Offshore, whereby we split the marine vessel business from the oil and gas business, the engineering oil and gas business. So we did an acquisition of Tanjung Kapal for investment of nearly 250 million. Our outsourced investment, Mavis is one of them. Mavis is a good story. They started, I think, back in 1997 in Malaysia. They are all Masalin. I think they are partners of ex-partners of BCG. They have one common trait. They all married Malaysian. So they set up shop in KL. And actually started investing, started to set up a fund. The first fund was very small. I think it was only about 70 million ringgit. They invested in a brand called Drivers. I'm not sure whether you know Drivers. You guys are probably too young to have babies, but Drivers is backwards, like backwards, right? So what they do, I think they bought drivers for about 30 million ringgit, and later they sold it for nearly about 70 million US, about 270 million. So they make like 20 over times money on the investment. So it's like a huge investment. Since then, they actually now become the largest regional Southeast Asia private equity firm. They manage about 2.5 billion US. So under our selection process, they were selected to be one of our outsourced partners. So they made 3 investments already. Ekuiti Asia, this is a retail brand that owns Crocs Malaysia, the kids stuff bottle advert. So they are quite a relatively mid-sized retail company in Malaysia. They also bought over MBO, nothing to do with me, despite my experience in Media Prima. They actually bought over cinema business. Is the 3rd largest cinema after GSC and TGV. So now they actually control about together with their co-investment, about 90% of the company. They've also just completed the GO, the general offer of SEGI. Obviously, the money that you use from our fund is relatively small, but in terms of the total investment that we stayed together with their fund sales, was about 700 million ringgit. So generally, these are the investments that our funds have been involved in. We have done in total, as shown there, about 1.3 billion ringgit, and through the co-investment and partnership that we have with the others, have facilitated about 1.8 billion worth of capital in the company. Now, so at the end of the day, as I started my presentation, our job or our task, if there's something that we would like to aspire to, is really to try to build what we call the leading companies of the future. So that's why we try to focus our investment to certain sectors so that we can have actual meaningful impact in this particular sector. So F&B, our strategy is to consolidate and put in all the different brands that we have into one large F&B group, and actually to try to build probably the 3rd largest F&B group in Malaysia. I'm sure you know in Malaysia and in any industry, F&B is a very fragmented market. So the leaders in Malaysia, as you know, is QSR, which owns KFC and Pizza Hut. Their revenue is probably about 2.5 billion at the moment. Second company is probably McDonald's. After that, in reality, there are really no large company. They call probably Berjaya Retail, which at the moment owns Starbucks, Wendy's, and Krispy Kreme. Maybe Secret Recipe, which is pretty large. But we think there is a potential to actually to build the 3rd largest F&B group in Malaysia. So that's our plan. Try to put in all of the so-called F&B, different F&B brands that we actually have, and then translate them into a large F&B group. Education, I think we are nearly there already. Our 3 groups, UCTI, APEC, KLMU, and then UMTech, at the moment collectively have 30,000 students in total. I think the other comparable is probably SEGI and probably Taylor's. But generally, in terms of the private sector market, I think we are probably one of the largest group already. And that's where our largest investment in 40% of our fund at the moment is in the education sector. The 3rd, which are currently work in progress, we really want to create one of Malaysia's largest OSV company. At the moment, Bumi Armada by far is the largest company. After that, there's a lot of relatively small OSV company like Ala Maritime, Jasa Marine, etc. and all that. So our plan is to actually try to pursue consolidation within this particular sector. So we hope in the next couple of months to be able to actually announce investment such that we can pursue consolidation and build large OSV companies. Because our idea is that as long as we can build these so-called large companies, we really would have achieved meaningful impact, because we have transformed some of them from what we call mid-sized company into these so-called large large companies. And that's where employment is created, management opportunities, value can be created. Because there's not enough scale, and this is my personal view, there's probably not enough scale in a lot of Malaysian businesses. So roughly, I think that's wrap up the so-called the EKUINAS side of the presentation. In terms of the values that we actually try to espouse, in general, some of these words are really values that we at EKUINAS passionately believe. We are very commercially driven. We pursue excellence, focus, merit-based, passion, humility. And maybe this is the right time. I probably to tell a bit about my journey in where I'm here now. So the story of my journey. I guess I've been very blessed. I got a scholarship, went to UK. After graduation, able to work in the audit firm, which is now defunct. It's called Anderson. I'm not sure if you remember the Android. But at that point of time, we thought we were pretty good. I'm not sure it didn't turn out that way. Obviously, so after 4 years in Anderson, I decided to come back. By that time I spent nearly 9 years in UK. I really wanted to actually come back. I think, like some of you, I'm sure you went through this particular experience when you decided to come back. You're not quite sure what you actually wanted to do. Now, at that point of time, same. I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do. Definitely not audit. I'm not sure if I wasn't there somewhere, but I was very good at audit. So I then sort of I guess that's the first part that I wanted to share with you. I then make an unconventional choice, and maybe that's something that I think is probably different. So instead of working in an investment bank or went back to corporate, I actually chose a small firm. Actually, the job is what I call a bag carrier. I actually was a carrier bag to my boss, which at that point of time was a so-called quasi-entrepreneur. He works for a company or firm called Turnaround Managers, but generally they serve Renault. Now, I'm not sure whether you guys are too young, but these are back in 1995, this was 1996. And this is the height of Go Malaysia. I'm not sure whether you know, at that point of time, it's all Malaysia boleh, Malaysia can invest everywhere in the world. We make investment, $1 billion investment every single day. They were Mr. MOUs, whatever, and all that. But Renault was probably the leading corporate, and my boss, his name was Dato Abdul Rahman, which coincidentally, I'm not sure whether you guys know, is the ex-PKR corporate secretary or whatever. So I actually became his bag carrier. He actually worked for a lot of it for Tan Sri Halim in Renault, and as I said, it was exciting times. Everything was scared, and I think we were looking at deals everywhere from TV station to urea project in Argentina to National Steel Company in the Philippines, which by the way lost about 3 billion ringgit. So, so that was the time. So I actually literally just half carry his back and learn. I guess through osmosis. I mean, learning how actually entrepreneurs make their decision. Not through a lot of analysis, I can say, but putting that aside, I did that for about 2 years until the crash came in, and this was 1998. This was really where the not only political crisis, the economic crisis actually hit us, and literally there was no job. I mean, work stopped. Obviously, there were no deals to be done. And literally, I think the firm sort of ceased operation. So I actually applied to Dana Harta, and at that point of time, Dana Harta was, I'm not sure you remember Dana Harta, but Dana Harta was the firm that government started to actually set up to buy back loans from the banks. And at that point of time, Dana Harta was probably the only place that was hiring people, because obviously the Malaysian economy was still there. So lucky enough, I think I had to write in 5 times before I actually got an interview, and actually then from that go years of actually trying to doing deals, then really just become what I call a low-brow executive or simple executive. We were actually just doing loan papers. Actually it's a pretty boring job, but I guess what I did, and again, that's basically the second learning that I had, was that whatever is worth doing is really worth doing well. And even though I think a lot of the work was quite mundane, I actually felt that really you should do it to the best of your ability. And I spent quite a lot of time really learning, because I've never worked in a bank before, never know how loan was structured and to do. So really learn a lot about restructuring loan and doing that. But after about a year and a half, I felt quite bored in terms of the actual work. And I guess I was young enough at that point of time, together with, I'm not sure you know my partner, I'm not sure whether you know my partner, or my ex-partner now, is Shahrial Rizwan, who's now Deputy CEO of EPF. And we decided that, okay, maybe we are young enough, why don't we try to set up our own consulting firm. Now you must remember, this is prior to the ethos, the Bina Fikrs of this world, whereby really setting up your own firm wasn't very, very profitable. But I decided that, okay, let's take a chance, set up something on our own. And I have to say, we didn't really do well. I mean, not doing well in what sense, but we had one fundamental issue being an entrepreneur. We really didn't know how to charge fees properly. We didn't know how to collect money, which is the key learning for me, is that make sure your revenue model is absolutely right before you start any business. But the good thing, or the alhamdulillah thing that actually happened, was that and I think this is where I got to give credit to my ex-bosses in Dana Harta. They knew that I think we did quite good work. So they recommended us to the government. The government at that point of time, I'm not sure you know, never had the practice of actually appointing any external consultant. The government at that point of time does a lot of work internally. But obviously there was some work that they couldn't do. So they sort of like outsourced and asked us to actually do that. And that brought in, I guess, the opportunity for us to lead and to manage MRCB. Now again, I'm not sure how familiar you are with MRCB, basically it's Malaysian Resources Corporation, Berhad. It was another high-flying conglomerate back in the 1990s until the recession really hit it hard and really got into financial trouble. At that point of time, when we came in, this was 2001, MRCB virtually was involved in every sector of the industry, from banking, I'm not sure if you guys remember, it actually owned a significant chunk of RHB, from power, actually owned power plant, Malakoff used to be part of MRCB, he used to own media, of course, TV3 and STP, he used to own, or he still does, he owns property, which is Cal Central, which at that point of time was really, it's an empty space. I think they only had the station. So generally, I think we were lucky enough to be appointed by the board in 2001. And really, while it sounds glamorous, it sounds big, but literally, MRCB were dying through a huge amount of debt. I think the total amount of debt of MRCB at that point of time was about 4 billion. There were about 4 billion ringgit. About billion US, billion plus US, and really there were no cash flow even to pay salary virtually after the first month. So Shari and I just came in, and we were we were quite young. We were only 30. I was 32. I think Shari was 31 at that point of time. And never managed a corporation or a unit, never managed a unit bigger than 6 people. And here we are actually having to run a corporation which had thousands of people and literally dying. So Shari and I look at each other and say, I still remember the day, I think it was in August someday, and then we look at it, and of course typically our HQ at this Malaysian style, we have CEOs all have a dedicated lift, nobody can use that lift, so we will move up, we went out together and said, okay, went to the penthouse, which is like huge. Say, okay, sat down to look at each other and say, shit, what do we do now? we really had no idea. And actually, to tell you the truth, what we did is actually went to a bookstore and actually bought a book. And again, I'm not sure whether it's a pretty good book if you ever like to read books about corporate. It's a book by Jack Welch, which is a GE called Straight from the Gut. So literally, Shari and I were just reading it and saying, okay, maybe this is what we should actually do. Actually say, it really work. Of course, we couldn't say that to any of your staff. And then one time we come back, everybody was so serious, expecting that this 30-year-old guy has answers to the problem that they have. And we literally didn't, and we were probably bullshitting most of the time at that point of time. But from that, I guess what we learned is really about focus, really about being very commercially driven. So the first thing that we did was we really came up with a very simple plan called 3R, and this basically applies to the media side as well, which is really restructure, and then we actually rationalize, and then we actually rejuvenate. So what we did was, the first thing that we did, we sell every single thing that we can sell to raise cash. We sold the banks, we sold the power plant, we sold the now glamorous golf course in South Africa. We sold every single thing, generally to raise money, to pay down debt, so that we don't get foreclosed. So that's what we actually did. And the second part was that we then sort of like wanted to say we must have focus. We split. We said that there's no way you can run a group whereby it's involved in media, involved in property, involved in construction. So we split the group into two, and actually then said, okay, media is really important for the government, so we need to safeguard a particular interest, and that's why we split the TV3 and MSTP and created what we call Media Prima. Now at that point of time, I knew I wasn't very good at property and construction, and I sort of enjoyed watching TV, so I actually told Syariel, okay, I'll take the media side, I'll take the property side, the construction side. So that's how I ended up, I guess, on the media side. And I still remember when we created, obviously I was ED in TV3 before, and also ED in NSTP. We had these two companies, and it was roughly, both bleeding money, and really didn't know what to do with it. But slowly, I think again we applied the same principle. We sort of like had to take the tough decision. I think we did 5 DSS. I think by that time I was called the king of DSS. We really had to lay off people, which was a very, very tough decision to do. So we took that. We really then turned around the business. Then after that is what we call the growth path, and that's where I learned all about passion and talent. And we said that okay, and really nobody pushed us at that point of time. We could be happy after turning around TV3 and STP. We could do things on our own, and I don't think anybody would want more. But we really said, okay, let's try to build a very significantly large leading media group in Malaysia. And we know that it was tough to actually compete against Astro, and we said that no, we've got to solve our own issue, and let's focus on the advertising-based business. So from that two businesses, we then actually said, okay, we want to go into a growth path and actually learn, actually build basically a leading media group. So we went to acquire 8TV, acquired TV7, we acquired TV9, complete the so-called TV platform, went into radio, so we acquired Hot FM, Fly FM, and 1FM, I think for the Chinese. Then acquired the outdoor business. I think now Media Prima owns basically the largest outdoor business in Malaysia, and really built a group. In total, I think when we came in, our market cap of TV3, MRCB, and NSTP was probably combined in excess of a billion yuan. By the time I think both of us left, and very coincidental, we left roughly at the same time. I think MRCB, Media Prima, generally I think total market cap at one time was about 5 million ringgit. So generally I think we sort of created a great amount of value. And the key, as I mentioned, was passion. And I think on the Media Prima side, I was lucky enough to actually build a very strong team of people. I'm sure you know them, but Dato Rizwan, who I recruited from Berhad, became the CEO of TV3. Ahmad Izamuma, who was the was the EMI CEO, then became, we recruited him to become the CEO for 8TV. And invariably, we had Dato Amrin, of course. And we had a really good second team, very dedicated, very passionate leaders, and I think I was really lucky to actually join the team. Having said that, there was always throughout this the one lesson or the one principle of values I actually try to adopt is humility. Throughout what you actually do, I think it's really important to have that, because without that, arrogance and hubris actually will come in. And that's what actually happened. I mean, literally, I think we grew Media Prima every single year. We were doing deals. So every single year, I think we were doing deals, and every deal that we do was doing great. We turned around, actually became very successful. So much so, I'm not sure again, and of course we didn't quite highlight this. We were feeling pretty invisible. I mean, we were doing deals, and we said, okay, next port of call is international. We wanted to go international. So back in, I think, 2008, we then invested in a TV network in Philippines called, it was ABC5. So we call it, we changed it into TV5. And we invested about 50-60 million. And obviously, because that's where, when things become very successful, you become overconfident, you say, you can turn around everything. But that was a key lesson again, and that's why always remind me of actually, the humility and hubris you got actually to make sure. And true enough, right? Because obviously it's a tough market. The crisis came in, as you know, 2008 was a really tough year. And obviously we needed more money, which we didn't have to actually invest. So we had to exit, and we had to exit at a significant loss. Of course, I think, the whole issue is that something that you could afford. But it really taught me that it's really important to make sure that you stay grounded to what you actually have, and really, be careful of what you actually do. So I guess that's the value that we try to imbue in EKUINAS. And we try to be very commercially driven. We try to pursue excellence all the time. We're very focused. We hope we're very merit-based, and passion and humility. I think is really important traits that we value. And I'm pretty lucky to have a great team in EKUINAS. We're not a big organization. There's only 40 plus of us. And in terms of the team members, we have a combination coming from investment bank to operations, as well as to entrepreneur. Surida, for instance, used to own Big Tree company that we actually bought. So I think it's really important for us to have a mixture of, I guess, investment bankers, operational guys, as well as entrepreneurs. So I guess spoken long enough, and I hope that's useful. I thank you again for inviting me to give this talk, and I'll take any questions. Let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato Abdul Rahman, for being very candid with us. I'm sure the similarities between Dato Abdul Rahman and Ahmad Umar, they actually put on slide the takeout of the day, commercially driven, pursuing excellence, focus, humility. I think Ahmad Umar did something along the line last time. So, you know the drill, Q&A, introduce yourself, where you're from. Limit it to 2 sentences and then straight to your question. Okay, let's go to question number 1. It's only the one. Farna, can you please?
Hi, Dato. My name is Nancy. Just a question. Once you have actually decided to actually invest in a company or business, what sort of milestones you're looking for? Are you looking mainly at IRR? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of what we do after we actually acquire. Generally, before we make the investment, I think that's where the evaluation is so critical. We try to develop what we call value creation plan. Value creation plan are effectively things that 4 or 5 things, and it shouldn't be more than 4 or 5 things, were actually really, really critical to grow the company. But the rule of thumb in private equity is that you should double the value of the company. And to double the value, generally you got to virtually double the bottom line. So that's what we actually do. So in any business that we look at, before we actually invest in them, we would identify what are the 4 or 5 key growth drivers of the business. And what we hope to actually achieve, you're absolutely right, is the so-called IR, or the return. But at the end of the day, to increase or enhance equity, you actually need to increase the return. So what we do effectively before we come in is identify what the 3-4 things we could be, grow internationally, do another acquisition, reduce cost, or expand product line. But all of that is linked to the numbers or the so-called objective, which is to increase the value, the bottom line of the company, and enhance basically the added value. So that's what we do. Hope that answers the question.
Can I stand somewhere here? Sorry. I just want to introduce myself. I am Haji Mustafa Ong. And I'm quite impressed. This is the third time perhaps sharing with you our experience. You are young, the future leaders of Malaysia. Now, Dato Rahman, I think I have got a few questions for you. But please allow me to say a few words to motivate our youngsters. There should be 2 speakers this evening. One is Natasha, she's not here. I don't know why, maybe very busy. But to cut it short, young people get excited all the time, but not necessarily motivated. That's my experience. I'm 69 today. I'm not young, I'm 69. With 6 grandchildren, 6 lovely children, 2 girls, 4 boys. But I made it. I made it because of determination in life. When I was young, I always wanted to see the world. So I ended up to be a diplomat. Okay? Those who Google, those who read, they all know Mustafa Ong. But I like to share this little bit of thing with all of you today because you are the young leaders, the future leaders of Malaysia. That's very important. Unity, trust, confidence in your leadership, confidence in your leaders. You may be rich, you may have achieved high status, but if you are not having this humility, you will go nowhere. There are a lot of youngsters, as Dato Rahman, he knows, I know a lot of his contemporaries. When they are up, they forget below. They forget their old friends who help them because one chip already, they walk like that. Never behave like what politicians do. To cut it short, I would be proud of my Malaysian youth if they always think of the future.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have a question for them?
The question very simple. I know you are very impatient. The question very simple. I've got 3 questions. You are high up in the corporate world. One is, can you just enlighten us about Pemuda, Pemandu, and also CSR. CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, is the order of the day. I'm a politician. The people are fed up with so many things. MRT, for example, right? We run into some problems, right? It's not that we don't want facilities, we want. But there are a lot of things not right. We have GDP. Are we doing well on the ground? To be honest, we are not. Why? Corruption.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay, I will stop. Thank you very much.
Okay, I need one question to repeat myself. Very minimum, your name and where you come from. 2 sentences and straight to the question, please.
Thank you, I'm Hamidi. I'm currently working in Bank Malaysia. I have 3 questions here. One is, how does your target sectors align with the ETP? And does the performance of EKUINAS contribute to the performance of ETP? And second question is, what if the business fails? What are the resolvability measures that you have? What is your provisioning looks like? What's your capital requirements of EKUINAS itself in absorbing expected loss and so on? My third question is, I'm not totally convinced that moral suasion is the only strategy that EKUINAS have in terms of influencing a business or a company. I mean, maybe you can share what are the strategies that EKUINAS has, in terms of, when you see that the business is not going to the direction as what you expect, what will be the things that, you need to have the say in a decision. Yeah, I think, and then one comment is that I think in the slides on the business growth, probably one of the things that you may want to consider is the function of the credit guarantee corporation in terms of the SME. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think three questions. One, how does our core sectors align with ETP? Generally, I think when we, and I've got to be honest, when we set it up, I think our focus was really trying to actually to push. We go up, we call bottoms up, which is really trying to focus on good companies, good industry, good companies in industries that have potential. So some of them, I think is there. Healthcare, I think, is one of those industry. Education is, I think, one of the key areas that in the NTA that government wanted to actually to focus on. But in reality, to us, I mean, we sort of like move away from what we call the new technology area, which I think ETP tries to actually to promote as well. Because our key part being private equity is that our focus tend to be on businesses which are already in existence, rather than what we call startups or new venture, which I think ETP also is responsible to actually to promote. So I think there are certain areas I think we are common, but we are very much driven on trying to build what we call, the future leaders of future leading companies of Malaysia. So I think while I think we have some similarity, we tend to be very focused on identifying or looking at companies specific rather than actually try to align specifically to ETP. I'm not saying that it's not right or wrong. I think ETP is really important as part of our government plan. It's just that I think we wanted to be very focused in terms of developing specific companies rather than specific industries. The third question that you actually asked, which is what do we do if the companies go wrong? Now, that's the difference, I guess, with EKUINAS or private equity compared to a lot of other investment. We actually play a very, very active role. And that's why one of our investment criteria, which I didn't share with you today, was that we actually take a stake no less than 20% in the company. We can go up to 100%, but we take no less than 20%. That is to make sure that we have some sort of influence in terms of the business. Now, of course, if it's minority, it's still slightly tougher. But what we actually try to do, convince basically the management or the shareholders that these are the path that you actually should pursue. In terms of actually work that we do, we actually run or help to run companies via what we call escrow. So we actually have what we call an executive committee where we sit, management sit, the entrepreneur sit, and everyone really dissect the business, actually say, are we heading on the right direction? So with that, I think we are able to actually influence. And one typical example, I guess, is Tanjung Offshore. Now, I'm sure you know this hasn't done very well since we actually invested in. And we've been spending the last 2 years together with the entrepreneur to actually say, look, we've got to create value. And we feel the best way to create value was to demerge the group, to split the engineering side and on the OSD side. And it took us a long time because we really wanted to do it right from the start. But of course, the entrepreneur had a different view. But we finally convinced him, and we are happy to actually to do that. And we believe now, long term, Tanjung Offshore will be in a good position by having the so-called focus. So I think that's the third question. I can't quite recall the second one, which is...
what's your resolvability measures if a business fail? I mean, your provision.
Okay. Now, for all private equity, I think there are a couple of things that you could do. The worst case is just cutting, because a lot of businesses, if it fails, you've got to accept and take the loss. So, but in general, I mean, that's the worst case scenario. Nobody wants a complete write-off on the investment. But of course, the things that we could do, and again, I gave a good example on Tanjung Offshore, is really to, again, look at the things that you can actually influence and to really create value. And we are not averse to pumping more money, for instance, for the demerger. We're adding another 250 million on the investment. and actually try to really split the company into two and really make it work on that. So we have what we call, and we monitor our investment very, very closely, and that is why in EKUINAS or in private equity, quality is more important than the quality, because we are not able to actually to look at too many companies, and that's something I guess we have to learn, because the level of debt and involvement that we have is quite significant.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Jia. My question is, I believe people like, for example, Tan Tiam Hock of Alliance Cosmetic Group and George Ang of Revenue Valley, I believe there are people who are passionate, who build their business from scratch, and I believe their businesses have been doing very well. I'm just a bit curious, like, how do you manage to persuade and convince entrepreneurs to sell part of their company to EKUINAS?
Good question. Yeah, it's never easy. One challenge that we had, especially in 2011, something that we faced, was that the deal flow sort of like slowed down. And it's natural. Because when we set up EKUINAS, a lot of people ask, so if our company is doing, I mean, you obviously want to choose good companies or great companies, but if our company is good, we really don't want an outside investor. We really do not, might as well basically own it. And that was a lot of question on whether we can actually identify enough investment to actually undertake. And as I mentioned, 2011, it was a tough year. But I feel, and this is where there are a couple of reasons why entrepreneurs such as Mr. Tan and George, both of whom we respect very dearly, wants to have outside investors. Now, one probably Mr. Tan is a good example. He built the business. I think he started it 20 years ago. And he had a partner. His partner was the late Mr. Ang Guang Seng, who used to own Petaling Garden. Now, his motivation was that after 20 years, his partner passed away. So his partner has 50% of the business, he had 50% of the business. So the partner passed away, and he really, after 20 years, really wanted to bring the company to the next level, which is to grow regionally. It's good in Malaysia, it's good in Singapore, but really he wanted to become or to try to transform the company into a leading regional cosmetic company. And he felt that, look, for whatever that he's done, he needs outside investors to actually to help him to take that, both in terms of capital. Also, he wants to crystallize some of the money, as well as basically the partners' estate wanted to actually to crystallize the investment. So private equity guys are really ideal for this type of businesses whereby it's mid-sized, it is grown quite to a certain level, but the reality is the shareholders either want some partial exit, wants basically to do something which is to actually to grow to the next level, but really don't want to risk their own capital, and that's where I guess private equity guys come in, and that's what we and Mavis actually saw. We spoke to Mr. Tan, and I know Mr. Tan quite well because he was one of the advertisers in Media Prima, TV3. I think he started his business, when he wanted to grow his business, I think he started advertising on TV3 very small, and then really grew the business. So the chemistry was right, the reason was right, and that's how we actually did that. Josh was slightly different. He was always what we call a founder, but he always needed capital, and FME requires capital. So he already had financial investors backing him, and financial investors wanted to actually exit, and that's where I guess we can come in. So the story is, I guess, in a lot of Malaysian businesses, they are obviously entrepreneurs know that if they know where they want to bring to the company and they need a partner, that's where I guess private equity is very ideal. Whereas before, if you think about Malaysian corporate world, a lot of Malaysian companies, they go listing. The predominant ambition of any entrepreneur, I guess, in Malaysia before was to go listing. So when they make 3 million, 5 million, 6 million and get profit, they go for listing. Now at that point of time, of course, PE, your valuation, price to the PE multiple is very, very high. Now, if your company makes less than 30 million ringgit or 50 million ringgit, in reality, the valuation multiple that you're getting is really not much. So that's where, just like in the Western world, private equity can be that bridge before it becomes large for you to build it up, for entrepreneurs to actually to partially exit a bit and really help the company to grow before listing. And that's what we believe is the opportunity in private equity in Malaysia at the moment.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Yin. I'm a student, but I'll be starting my internship at Telecom next week. I would like to ask about whether does EKUINAS actually actively restructure capital when you acquire companies. I actually believe that it's very difficult to restructure capital when you consolidate companies where many complications actually come up.
Yeah, I think that's part of our task, especially in consolidation. I think we've done a lot of companies, and then we got to make sure the capital is firstly sufficient to structure well, whether it's debt, whether it's equity. So a part of our job is making sure the company has the right capital structure. For the F&B, for instance, most of our deal involve buying existing shares, but also injecting new money. And of course, when you inject new money, there will be dilution for existing shareholders. So these are the issues. So how do we structure it right? And I don't want to go into the technical element, but we spend quite a bit of time making sure each of our group has the right capital structure. I hope that answers the question. Very sorry, the guy in the back.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, lady in the back.
Hi, I'm Mohamed from KPMG. My question for you tonight is that given the volatility of the job market today, right, how valuable is company loyalty?
Loyalty. Tough question. I think loyalty is a very important trait. I am a great believer of loyalty, meaning that I don't think you should do anything that that reflects badly on you. I'm grateful, etc. and all that. But to be fair, I think loyalty. I think it's a two-way thing. Just you expect, I think, basically your employees to be loyal to the company. I think the company needs to be loyal for the employee, and that may mean effectively that you got to let the people go. So I'm a great believer, and while I like to think that EKUINAS, we're a great company, or we try to actually value human capital, I have to say our turnover rate is probably about 15% over the last 2 years, and that's high. And that means that it's not so easy to keep the people. Every single people that we lose, of course, we feel very, very painful. But every single person that I believe left EKUINAS, and you can talk to some of them, I believe if that particular person finds something that EKUINAS cannot deliver, then I think it's our job to let them go. And let them go in a very amicable manner. And I'm a great believer of that. So as much as I think it pains the company, to me, loyalty, as I said, is a two-way part. And some of our guys, left to join, international investment banks or to do that because obviously, there are certain things that EKUINAS can give, and I think you should understand that, and you should, I think, be respectful of that, and most important, keep good relationship. I think that's one thing that I think you should, always value in any corporation or any place that you actually work. Never burn your bridges, because the friends or the bosses that you actually work invariably, I think, will reappear back in your life. So my view, I think, do what you feel is right. Obviously, if you don't feel what's right in the company, it's not delivering what you do, then I think it's only fair for you to actually make that particular call. For instance, as I said, I had to go through experience in doing a lot of BSS, and a lot of people in Malaysia now, it's very sensitive. A lot of people think it's unfair. But I'm a great believer that if the company, firstly, can't afford basically to hire a particular staff, and two, generally when you can't afford, you're in trouble. You are really not providing great employment to these people. It is our job. I'm a great believer that it's our job. It's our task to actually to let them go. But must let them go in a manner that basically that's very respectful, rewards them, so that they can actually, earn a better career elsewhere. And one of the things I'm very happy about, a lot of people that I met, ex-staff of say TV3, that generally, taken up the VSS, comes to me and now basically say how well they are doing, and I think that's very heartening. So to me, as I said, it's a two-way thing about loyalty. It is important. I don't think we should never be ungrateful, but I think each of us have to decide what's best for ourselves, same as basically as the company. Sorry, person back now.
Okay, one more question for the back. We'll take two more persons, yeah?
Thank you. From talking to what we do, deals, most investments will come along with a financial package, or like a leverage buyouts, and then they want a capital company will be backed by high-grade loans. So is that the case also for Equitas investment in Malaysia?
No, that's a quick answer. We don't do that much leverage. We do leverage. We are allowed to actually do leverage, but unlike what we call the LBOs, whereby they do a huge amount of the capital, raise a lot of capital through debt, we are very conservative. I think we don't do any deals more than debt to EBITDA of about 2.5 times. Generally, that's the level that I think we go for. Whereas the typical LBOs generally have debt to EBITDA of about 4.5 times. So that's a bit more technical, but so I think more time because I think some questions maybe that you've been raising. Sorry, person.
Good evening, I'm Gio from Berhad Consulting. I just have two quick questions. The first is, are there distinct differences between government-linked PE firm and PE firm in terms of operations, resource management, apart from the majority of management control? The second question is, moving forward, would there be more investment in the PPP, public-private partnership?
First question, the difference between government and private. Generally, I think both of us try to focus on generating commercial return. But firms like EKUINAS or CDC, which does development for UK government for the developing world, we have what we call social objective. So, and for us, basically, our social objective, as you can see, is increasing equity, increasing employment, increasing management, and improving on the value chain. So that's roughly the big difference between private equity and I guess government-linked equity, because we tend to have objectives other than commercial returns. To answer your question, whether they are likelihood of doing more PIPE deals, which is private investment in public equity, yes, I think it is. The reason is Malaysia. As you know, we have probably 1,000 plus companies being listed, and probably 80-85% of them are relatively small. They make less than 30 million ringgit profit. So generally, a lot of people think when we have private equity, we do not do public equity deals. We do. And in Malaysia, I think it's unavoidable for us to actually do it, simply because in Malaysia, there's a lot of companies or mid-sized companies which are listed. So we think that's one increasing aspect of Malaysian private equity market, simply because of the nature of the company.
From the talk you have just given, looks like you only look for already companies which have succeeded. Right? Maybe the question I would ask is, what would be your criteria in terms of identifying companies? And more specifically, the question is, there may be companies in certain sectors which has a lot of potential, but we are at the stage of growth, but the books are not beautiful. The figures are not good. Will you consider those companies for helping?
Yeah, I think to answer, we don't. I think success is a relative word. So while the companies that we have, they have achieved a degree of success, as I said, most of them are still mid-sized companies. And their ambition for most of them, they believe they can grow really big. They can really drive growth either through regional expansion or to do a consolidation, etc. and all that. So that's where we like to choose. Our biggest criteria, I guess, the company has what we call high growth potential. And that's the word. However you actually grow, to us basically we can look at it, but if you have that high growth potential, that's the main big criteria. In terms of when we look at companies which the books are not so great, I have to actually to highlight to you, there's a lot of Malaysian mid-sized businesses whereby the back office is pretty bad. And that's not because of anything, because the skill set to build companies in the early stage are what we call fast-moving entrepreneur who takes decisions. Some of them really do not focus on the back office. So a lot of work that we actually do is that in Malaysia, I'm not saying other private equity does that. For us in particular, we tend to actually to accept that, and we identify upfront what are the things that need to do to improve your back office, your financial records, etc. So we do not discount that particular one. Great, that's one. I think the last question, unless there are.
Second last.
Hi, Dato. My name is Harris. I'm an entrepreneur. You mentioned Cheryl a few times in your presentation earlier. He's managing over like $500 billion ringgit, and I think only 1% is allocated for private equity, a very small amount. Is that because the PE industry here has a very low risk appetite? Is that the same for VCs? And my number 2 question is, where do you see EKUINAS in 5 years' time?
Okay, first question. Yes, Cheryl managed 400 billion and I'm Bitly 1.8 billion. So I guess like before really. I think Malaysia private equity is still at the nascent because institutions are still reluctant to invest in private equity. And it didn't help that Malaysia really private equity is probably relatively new, and a lot of Malaysian private equity started off in what we call venture capital. And the venture capital industry in Malaysia is really tough, and the success has been limited. So I think institutions are wary about private equity because first they are not used to it. 2, I think it's a bit of chicken and egg. You don't give people the opportunity, people can't make it work, and then because of that, then you say that this therapy doesn't work, and that doesn't quite, it becomes a vicious cycle. So in Malaysia, only institution like EPF I think does it relatively small. Kuala does it, but pretty small. Tabung Haji PNB doesn't do quite private. So it's a challenge, and that's where I guess part of our role is, even though it's not a stated objective, is trying to see whether we can develop the private equity market in Malaysia. Because if you look at globally, it works. So there must be a time, and the reason why private equity works is that the best private equity firm in the world delivers 15-20% IR, whereas the best public equity firm in the world can deliver market return, probably slightly above market return. So invariably, I think as Malaysia mature, institutions may be forced to actually look at private equity, and we think that private equity market will grow. But I think institutions have to give people a chance, and that's not so easy because in private equity, if you're a first-time fund, rarely anybody actually wants to give you money. So it's a really key issue, I guess, in private equity.
We'll take last question for our leader. Okay, hi, Farhana, PNB. I was wondering if I can ask you about Malaysian Airlines. In your press release, having turned around having turned around MRCB, in your personal opinion, you talked about taking Malaysian Airlines private. What do you think can be that being a private company, Malaysian Airlines become a private company, and I don't know if there's any meeting you can take
I'm not sure.
Again, personal opinion.
I think in that airline industry is a tough industry. If you look at the global the global data about airline industry, I read somewhere, probably collectively made X billion, which is not a lot, and 80% of the companies involved are loss-making. So I think the structural issue in the airline industry, which makes it very, very difficult. In Malaysia, it's even tougher because I think you are faced with a lot of, external factors as well as internal factors. So it's a real tough turnaround. But the market cap of MAS now is about 3.5 billion. Down from 8 billion before. Asia now is 8 billion, the other way around. So I guess there will be a time whereby the value will come low enough that people will be interested to look at MAS. But it's a tough proposition, and I do not envy anybody that's that's involved. The two of my friends, I think, has been doing it for the last 5 years. So it's definitely tough, and they are lost by anyway. So.
I'd like to invite Dimitra to give Dato a token of appreciation from YCM. Very honored to join you tonight. Thank you very much.